Anybody that says we want to fly over people and doesn't advocate for a practical test as part of the UAS certificate, in my estimation, is making an ass out of themselves. I mean, we don't even know if people can fly these things.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 165, part 1. Are there questions that we should be asking? If you ask today's guest, he would say hundreds. Patrick Egan is the editor of the American desk at sUAS News and host and executive producer of the sUAS News podcast series, Drone TV, and the Small Unmanned Systems Business Exposition. Patrick's experience in the field spans military and civilian UAS applications. He was the director of special programs for the Remote Control Aerial Photography Association, and he is considered a subject matter expert on the UAS industry. This is part 1 of a 2-part interview with Patrick. Yes, there's a lot to talk about. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Patrick raises some questions about the drone industry, transparency, federal expenditures, priorities, special interests, and who's really advocating for small commercial drone operators. Some may feel his delivery is a little, shall we say, rough, but that's to be expected when passionate people express their opinions. Now, before we hear from Patrick, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign on Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to patreon.com/drone radio show to join the team. Now let's explore some questions on the drone industry with Patrick Egan of sUAS News. A recent GAO report found that the FAA's information on the extent of unsafe use of small UAS in the national airspace is limited. The report called into question the accuracy and completeness of the agency's current data and recommends that the FAA establish a mechanism to ensure the management of small UAS safety risks follows applicable principles and requirements, to which the FAA agreed to develop. My question, Patrick, if we currently don't have accurate data on the safety risks, how are we going to develop sound policies on UAS use?
This is the drum I've been banging on for more than a decade. If you don't know what the risk is, or how many, or where, or when, or whatever, and you got nothing. This is just like some kind of musical, well, it's not musical chairs, because that's what the FAA is doing. It's a rope-a-dope. It's just like, every year there's a new problem, and I've said this too. Every so many years, like the hobbyist, this isn't the first time the hobbyist was the problem. The hobbyist was the problem back in 1992. Hobbyist was the problem in 2005. Hobbyist was the problem in 2009. All of these problems keep cropping up every so many years. And then they say, okay, well, we're going to do everything about the problem that we can. I call it boiling the ocean for dollars. Okay. And, it's too big of a job. Nobody can really get it done. Oh, we got to have some performance-based standards and nothing. None of it ever comes to fruition because they're all, grasping and groping around in the dark. That's about all there is to it. If you don't have the data, you can't have a UTM. If you don't have the data, you would have known that registration wasn't going to fix all the ills that getting rid of 336 is going to get rid of. Is 336 going to, cure all of the repealing, not going to cure all of the ills? No, it's not. Now, the bottom line on that is it's going to be enforcement. I mean, we could go on on that one, too, because that's another thing that really kind of, people giving the FAA a pass on enforcement.
I do know from a local government perspective that most local governments don't want to be in the position of enforcing something that they can't pay for.
And the notion that, so you work in local government, right?
Right.
Okay, so what's going on out here in California? I don't know how it is where you hail from, but out here in California is really like ordinances and laws and stuff are for people that can pay fines. The other issue that you have here with this is even the FAA won't do their own enforcement because the regulations are flawed, and we saw that with the Taylor case. There are some like deep problems going on here.
So does anyone have a roadmap for getting us through this? Or is it a case where everyone's just trying to protect their own interest?
I think everyone's trying to protect their own interest, get their own money. A lot of these things are projects, and people are trying to get their money, man. They're trying to get the peanut across the line, come out smelling like a rose, I did my job, That's another one, even going back to the data, the NASA thing with the UTM, that's chapping my hide right now, the UAS and the NAS thing. And anytime I bring up Access 5, people go nuts. I already called all of this stuff. I called all of this stuff years ago, man. And I'm sure you probably, heard that about me. And they're like, oh, that Egan guy is just cranky and... he's mad at the world and, what's his name from Kitty Hawk called me petulant, and you know what? I even tweeted back. That's a good assessment of what I am. Because when people are wasting years of my life, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, and no one's even batting an eye. Stupid. It's the stupidest thing. It's the biggest waste of taxpayer money and, let's say, technological lead that I've ever seen. But I'm not, I'm not exposed to, I'm sure there's other colossal wastes of time and money. It's just this one's a tragedy, and this one I'm aware of.
Let's move on to the Drone Integration Pilot Program, where the FAA selected 10 communities to test local integration ideas. You're not a big fan of the program. Why is that? Because,
talking, 5 or 10, geographical regions or whatever are going to do this thing. For a country like the United States, you think we got to the moon, because we were like putting our toe in the water? No, it's total commitment. The more that I analyze this, the more I think about it, it's almost like kind of equate it to like a job or a project that someone gives to someone. They pay out some rope and, see how they do with it. And then either something good happens or they come back and get fired. That's kind of what I see going on here. The biggest thing with the UAS IPP that I see, what's more telling is who wasn't a winner. You see Amazon, people, it's political. Again, this all goes back to data. I've talked to people close to them. I said, look, if you took the advice and counsel that I gave you where you had kind of, your ducks in a row, and I don't want to go through it all because I don't want to give away free consulting to billionaires. I'm getting tired of that one too. You could actually build a case and go to the press and say, you know what, the whole reason we got left out of the UAS IPP was political. And this is why, because nobody has a safety case like us. But instead, they'll sit back and piss and moan. And that's okay, too, because then they'll probably wind up paying another, a couple of $1 million in consulting fees, which I think the economic forecast should be changed. And really, I think that the people that are really, let's say, getting the drone windfall are the lobbyists and the consultants. That's who's making the money here. The rest of you people out there, and I don't know, I wrote an article about it. There's people out there, there's like stakeholder, bag holder, and other. And you got to figure out where you are, If you're a stakeholder, you can afford lobbyists and consultants. Nobody's even calls the FAA on this. I am disgusted how gutless these supposed, advocates and experts are in this industry. Nobody's calling anybody on it. Oh, you want a beyond visual line of sight waiver? Well, if you have lobbyists, you get one. If you don't have lobbyists, you get nada. It's pathetic. But, there again, I'm only one cranky guy out here that nobody listens to, although that's not true. But anyway.
There's got to be some good opportunities in the industry, isn't there?
There is opportunity. I believe that 107, I still do, that the Part 107 thing was a gift. was way more liberal than we thought we would get. Believe me, it was a gift. And, people saying, well, this industry is not really going to blossom until you got beyond visual line of sight or, you can fly over people. That one anybody that says we want to fly over people and doesn't advocate for a practical test as part of the UAS certificate, in my estimation, is making an ass out of themselves. I mean, we don't even know if people can fly these things. Then you got people, we want to fly over people. Okay, well, where's the mean time between failure data on your drones that you want to fly over people? We don't have that data. That's not really true. The data exists. They don't want to share it because, I heard it was like 1 in 74 hours, and then I've heard as low as 1 in 25 hours. That's not very, let's say, reliable equipment to be flying over people's heads. And that's another one, too. This deal, you saw that drone that CNN, supposedly flying over people. Call that the fair weather drone. I mean, it's possible that all of the video that CNN does flying the drones over people and all the other affiliated news services and everything else are flying the fair weather drone over people, but I highly doubt that. All of the problems, really the root goes back to the lack of data. But anyway, here's the deal. There's tons of opportunity out there, but what is happening is you're seeing the prices are free falling on the services. Let's say 2-3 years ago, the cell phone tower inspection was $1,250 or $1,000. Today, that's $350. And they're pretty much delivering the same product that they were delivering 2 or 3 years ago, which is, have this concept of the 3 types of drone data: artistic, commercial, and regulatory grade. The regulatory grade is based on some sort of scientific type of process that's repeatable, written down, that you can share with people all over the world. You get the same data, person analyzes it, he or she is seeing the same data set, blah, blah, blah. That's what needs to be done. Even more would be actual software. Everybody talks about AI. Okay, let's have software that can spot anomalies and make recommendations. So the guy goes out there and flies, the pilot flies it, data's uploaded to the internet, analyzed, solutions are emailed to someone's email box, and they got 1 or 2 paragraphs of what needs to be done. Till the quality of the data comes up, I think the price is going to free fall. And as the price goes down, any really lower than the $350 mark, if it goes down to $150, I think you'll be down to $15 an hour or something by the time the whole thing's done. The paperwork, the phone calls, the analyzing of the data, yada yada.
Are you saying that because there are no standards for the data, that over time quality is going to degrade as operators try to compete on price?
Well, people say that, I'm sure you've heard the platitude, data's the new oil, and I say, well, is it light sweet crude or Silicon Valley snake? My car doesn't run on oil, it runs on a refined product. And I think it's the same thing with the data. And, even the Europeans, I think that, they did have a hard head start on us. And a lot of the stuff that they were bringing to market was, let's say, higher quality data. Some people go, the Europeans weren't ahead of us. But let's say I point to Airware buying Redbird, who had an income stream in that acquisition. So I do think that the quality of the data has got to get better. You have to have some sort of, like I said, scientific-based process, something that's proprietary, something that separates you from the other people. And again, this is something that we witnessed in the early 2000s. When there was no competition, you could charge what you wanted. You had a little breathing room. As competition started to move in, price points started to fall, quality of the data started to fall. But, there is a trade-off there. Some people just want to work in the drone industry and don't care if they only make, money part-time or whatever. I think that's another issue in this industry that people don't really talk about. Most people that are doing this commercially, it's part-time.
But won't this get resolved through market decisions? I mean, to stay competitive, operators will need to produce better data or make better interpretations of the data, and eventually that will raise the bar for the rest of the industry.
I've already said that this technology augments existing businesses. So like if you're let's say you're a, map maker, like a real one, surveyor, and you've got the stamp and you're state licensed and all the rest of that stuff, you already know all of the ins and outs of actually making a map. You're not just some guy hitting the go button on the cell phone app. And so my thing with it is, okay, so the expert, he's got the stamp, he's using this as a tool. It's almost impossible to quantify what the value is in the marketplace for that. Because the surveyor is not going to always use the drone. They're going to use a basket of tools. But on the other hand, if I want to be a service provider and I want to do mapping or whatever, there's a pretty steep learning curve. I'm seeing in construction, construction, drones for construction. Well, do you come out and you offer a service? Do you learn what the people need to learn to let's say, prepare the pad for a, concrete tilt-up? Or do we just have the guys that drive the tractors and do the planning fly the drone? It makes a lot more sense to me just to give the guys that are driving the tractors and preparing the site the drone, because they know what they're looking for. You don't have to tell them what they're looking for. I think that the drones as a service industry is going to be hard to compete in, especially if you don't have any proficiency in a field. That's going to be tough. I mean, even people, I'm going to do roof inspections. Okay, well, do you know anything about construction? Well, I painted houses one summer in college. Okay, well, you know anything about roof assemblies? No. Anything, like fluid dynamics, water infiltration? No. Roof assemblies look like? No. Are you, certified home inspector? No. Are you a general contractor? No. Why am I going to pay somebody to do that? Unless there's software that has AI in it that can spot these anomalies. And then the guy's just a pilot. But then, again, how much is that worth?
Yeah, because if everyone can just throw a drone in the air and get the same data from an AI source, then there's nothing to differentiate them from others.
Unless it's an art form, I would say that with television and movies, although a lot of what I'm seeing in television is just like, whew, man, they must have got somebody off Craigslist. But whatever, if it works. But I do think that the other model that we were just talking about, that's kind of a race to the bottom as far as wages are concerned. So again, think about if you're going to do something and you have a little bit of expertise in something, what is going to give you an edge against the next Best Buy flyer? That's where the money's at. So there is opportunity. And like I said, I think a lot of these people are probably part-timers. I'm buying equipment. I do some drone stuff, blah, blah, blah. Beyond visual line of sight, yeah, there's lots of uses for that. That goes back to the UAS IPP thing. I think that beyond visual line of sight is doable today. Okay. And I say I think because I don't have any scientific data to back that up. However, I have an example of Corn Bluff, Iowa that I use. It's a fictitious town. But, this guy lives, he's a Farmer Brown. He grows some corn. He's got about 450 acres. He lives about 25 miles from town. He uses a 1-pound drone to do some NDVI work with. It's got a range of about 15 miles. There's no air traffic there. He wants to be able to fly all of his corn patch beyond visual line of sight, whatever. I would consider that something that's relatively safe. And I would also consider that something that you could use math and the scientific method to figure out what the risk is. Okay? And now I'm not saying the Farmer Brown shouldn't have an endorsement on his license that maybe, he's taking a practical test. Possibly he has another endorsement where, he has an aviation band radio and, knows what they're talking about and could also use that radio. That is a drone integration pilot program. That around the entire country, figure out what the risk is, quantify it, start there. The UTM thing, the thing that I'm really kind of not happy about, there's a lot of it I'm not happy about, but one of the big things is you have a regulatory agency being the FAA that hasn't quantified any risk. NASA's gone out, and the estimate's going to be that they're going to spend $87.6 million developing or coming up with performance-based standards for the regulator, who I just mentioned, hasn't had any performance-based or any quantified any risks in the NAS. which was backed up in the GAO report, which is a drum I've been beating for over a decade. NASA's going to come up with some performance-based standards they're going to give to the FAA. All right, face value sounds good. We look at the track record of the FAA. They have a very poor track record of adopting performance-based standards from standards groups or anyone else. It's just, to me, the work it's a great idea. In the beginning, in the first meeting, I made my feelings known to the FAA representative that what they were saying was basically, we want you to design, build, maintain, and operate an unmanned traffic management system, or an ATC, for drones. And the people in the room, not only were they not aviation people, they weren't even really drone people. A lot of them were software people. And I said, well, you got anything down on the back of a piece of paper somewhere to give these people direction? No, they'll have to figure it out. What we're going to do is we're going to take those standards and we're going to go sell those to the manned interests. And I'm like, wow, all right, I think you might be a little optimistic there. Well, it didn't matter because that guy was retiring in the next week and he really didn't care. But this is the kind of shenanigans that we're dealing with as an industry. And so, anytime anybody tells you that, that Egan guy's cranky or he doesn't have any solutions, I don't have any solutions that include people's products. When I don't have any solutions that include people's products, they kind of discount what I have to say. But the bottom line is none of this stuff is really going to happen in a timely manner or in a manner that is, let's say, kind to the taxpayer without any scientific data. It all goes right back to that. I don't care what they want to do. Define the risk, define how many people are going to be in the NAS, where, when, and how many. That's all you got to do. And we could save everybody a bunch of time and money. We've wasted years. We've wasted hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. And we've lost the technical lead to the rest of the world. And that's where we're at today. So yeah, I'm cranky.
Now, the GAO report that we talked about earlier did recommend that the FAA develop a mechanism to collect better data, which should address some of the concerns, assuming that the report doesn't just sit on someone's desk.
Well, that's what happens. The din kind of dies down and we move on. This isn't anything new. When I was on the small UAS arc, I'm like, well, where's the data that, proves any of the conjecture you people are throwing out here? Why do we need rules? Where's the data that says that these things are a risk? I mean, I have a document somewhere. I sent a letter to the FAA and I asked, do drones pose a threat to the NASC or a risk? And they came back and said no. And I'm like, well, what are we doing here? It's the same thing even now with UTM in the olden days, prior to 2007. If you wanted to fly within 3 miles of an airport, you didn't even need to, but you would call this, what we advocated with the RCAPAs, that you call the tower and say, hey, I'm going to be flying over here on Mulberry Street. Oh, okay. Well, what time are you going to be up? Oh, we'll be up at noon. How long? 10 minutes. All right. Sounds good. Have a good day. Or, we got something going on here. It was usually how it worked. Took about 60 to 90 seconds. The long part was usually them asking what the FAA was working on for RC hobby aircraft or whatever else. So we had these systems in place. We had something that works. People trying to say, the hobby's changed. They've been saying it since 1992. The hobby's changed. Every so many years, the hobby changed. The hobbyist is the problem. If we did something with the hobbyist, we wouldn't have these problems, I don't even think even now with the sightings or whatever else. And, for full disclosure, I was interviewed for the GAO report, and I'm sure that I hit the point that the FAA has procedures in place right now to define near misses, the different severity. There's procedures. If it's really a near miss, you're supposed to get the crew and interview them and do an investigation. Did the FAA do any of that? No. People say, well, who's supposed to be watching the hen house? An advocacy group should be watching the hen house. Some group that represents, the industry or the hobbyist. And that's not what's happening. The world's largest advocacy group lost 2,000 members last year. They're saying it's an accounting thing. And I said, well, I don't think that was really well thought out. If you changed your accounting and you lost, 20% of your membership, something doesn't sound right there to me. I mean, maybe it was you didn't want to go up on the hill and sound like a braggart that you had 7,500 members. That was too many. We'll drop that down to 6,000. Something's awash there, but I don't think it's too hard to figure out. The word on the street is most people do not feel like they have any representation whatsoever, unless you have lobbyists.
Maybe you can expand upon that. If small commercial drone operators don't feel someone is working on their behalf, are they still excited about the industry, or are they starting to fall to the wayside and move on to other things?
Well, it's cyclical. I mean, we get a new crop of drone people every year or two. And you see people come into the industry and they, I'm going to make $1 gazillion on drones, and then they fall out. Some people stay. I will say, I'm seeing more and more. You see more and more people are adding them to their business. They're using them. They're using them for ag and some other things. And it's really kind of interesting to see the uses. And wow, this is cool. And that finally came to fruition or whatever. But much like the gold rush, the gold's not just laying there on the ground for you to pick up. It actually requires a little bit of work, business plan, whatever else. So I do think it's here to stay. I do think there's lots of businesses that can make money with drones, and those that can are using them, and they're going ahead and they're doing them. The downside, what we have here is we have a monopoly, how I see it. I mean, really, there's only one drone manufacturer. They make a great product at a great price point. I don't really agree with their, let's say, new and improved tactics. We're not really sure what's going on with the data collection thing. I know they hired an independent company to do a report, but they paid them. I know there's still some questions within the government. Some businesses, nobody cares. That's fine. I don't, whatever. I don't know. However, if for some reason, you don't get along with that company, you're out of business. Especially if you're making software or you're part of the SDK crowd or cell phone app or whatever. If you're not working with them, you're out of business. So that's a bad thing. I don't like that. I think we have a monopoly here. But moving forward, if your business case is predicated on beyond visual line of sight or, flying over people, looking at things in the current state, it's going to be a long time. The UTM, where you have, regular file and fly, is a decade out. Unless somebody mandates it, it's a ways out. The ID and tracking, nobody's been able to answer what 1 million drones look like on a cell phone app or a, ATC screen. It'll be automatic. The computers will do it. Oh, really? Okay. Well, what does a certification plan look like for that? Who? What? How big of a system are you building here? For how many drones? Well, I don't know. They say 1 million drones. Yeah, where? When? How many are in the NAS now? I don't know. To me, it sounds like you're trying to boil the ocean for dollars. That's what I see. Funny side note, when I was on the ARC, the FAA asked RTCA how many drones they thought would be in the air pretty much in the 2015 to 2017 time period, and they said none. 2020, they said, or even later on, there's something like 30,000, drones was their estimate. Those are the experts who are making the call. We got the experts now extrapolating the numbers. I don't think they know what they're talking about.
That's it for part 1 of episode 165 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Patrick Egan of sUAS News. I want to thank Patrick for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about sUAS News or want to connect with Patrick, check out the webpage at suasnews.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to patreon.com/drone radio show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.